allows us to know. We can expand our thinking and learn to stand strong with a strength of spirit and soul conviction to make a positive difference in our own lives and in our own little areas of society. And ultimately that will expand further and further and further. But it begins with awareness. The abuse that I was enduring under MK Ultra mind control was so extensive that I lost all my awareness. I lost my ability to reason. I lost my ability to question anything. More and more, I could only do exactly what I was told to do with no ability to hope anymore that there was some place in the world where people didn't hurt each other. Not only was my whole environment saturated with this abuse, but I couldn't even think anymore to hope.
Well, and we are live right here in my hand. Okay, that was, if you don't know that face, it should be very familiar. That was Kathy O'Brien, who was under the control of a wicked person named Dick Cheney, who was vice president and in and around the White House as the old order globalist man on the job to control our presidents. The reason I bring this up is not because of former Representative John Dingell's recent blurb in a Tool magazine, where he said we need to abolish the United States Senate. He's senile, he's bitter, he never could get a Senate seat, but he was in the House of Representatives for a long time and he knows a thing or two. I would agree that we should have public financing, but only when we know our votes are honestly and reputably counted with checks that we the people can tune in, go to where the votes are being counted, and actually verify that our votes are being correctly tabulated and recorded. What we know for sure happens in Santa Barbara County and a lot of other counties and some entire states is the votes are stolen. And you need to research that on YouTube, and you will see plenty of evidence that after you cast your vote, it goes the other way, not for the person you cast it for presidential, U.S. Senate, and House Reps, anything that's going to be key and important. But John Dingell raises a good issue that a few, I think the words he uses, obnoxious asses, control America from the Senate, but I say they control it from the Federal Reserve Bank, and they control the obnoxious asses that they put in the U.S. Senate. The solution is not to abolish the U.S. Senate and change the Constitution that way. The solution is to get the House of Representatives up to about 3,000 plus members. That means we have to have House districts are 20,000 or less. So take a city like Santa Maria, you have 5 House of Representatives. There's roughly 100,000 people, including Orchid. You'd have 5 House Reps. Then you'd be able to go to his office and say, hey, you represent me. Tell these knuckleheads we want our troops pulled out of 100 countries where they don't belong. We want them to defend our border with Mexico. So the criminals that come in with the people who just want a better life, and there's a lot of people coming across the border every day that just want a better life. But among them are a significant number of criminals. I myself have been to that border and to that park in Arizona that's got signs posted, dangerous because there's criminals coming across the Mexican border, and they come on jeeps with machine guns mounted to protect the people they're smuggling in, as well as the drugs and every other illegal thing they're bringing in. And it blows my mind that all this attention on the corporate media has been focused not on that little park in Arizona on the border of Mexico, but all the big media's been looking over at this wall that's not completed near San Diego, and people storming our border patrol. Ridiculous. This is what I call mind control. They're taking you somewhere you can't go. Mentally. And that's why I brought this clip that I personally taped. This is my own filming of Kathy O'Brien back when her cohort, Mr. Phillips, was still alive. He passed away about 1.5, 2 years ago, I guess. And he used to work for the CIA. He was one of their control agents, and allegedly he let himself slip, and he fell in love with Kathy and decided to help her get free from the system of CIA mind control. I know this is hard for some of you people to digest, especially this time of year when we should be talking about fairy tales like Santa Claus flying at 20,000 feet elevation in an open sleigh with 8 reindeers, or Rudolph leading the bunch and all that fairy tale stuff. Shh, kids, if you're under 5, don't pay attention to what I'm saying right now. But, you know, if we're ever going to get our republic back, where we the people actually control all 3 branches of government, which we don't control any of the branches right now, I'd like to think that Trump is not part of the New World Order, yet I haven't seen him get Hillary indicted. He keeps letting Mueller play his little game. What a bunch of nonsense. Indict Hillary. We know she stopped the SEALs. They've been on public television, if you caught it, saying, yes, we were ready to go and save our gay ambassador that was being stormed at the Libyan ambassador's compound. We could have saved him. We could have saved the other 2 people, the other security agents that were killed there defending our territory in Libya. That ambassador's compound is technically our territory. Every country that has an ambassadorship, the host country literally gives control of that compound over to the foreign country that has their ambassador. That's why the police just can't go storming into an ambassador's compound and say, we're arresting a couple of your spies. They can't do it because there's this protocol that it's more than century old, that ambassadors' compounds are sacred to the country from which the ambassador comes from and is posted there. So Hillary let this guy get murdered. His name was Stevens, I think. And she then had to destroy all her emails, but she wasn't using a secure server. Duh. Do you really want a president that stupid? Well, guess what? The Democratic Party did. They put her up as the nominee for president. Anyway, that's old news. Why Kathy's statements are important is we just got bombarded by mind control on virtually every network. CNN, Fox News especially, ABC, CBS, NBC, not so much the BBC, but all the major networks pounded us with this, oh, a great president has fallen, oh, George Herbert Walker Bush. You know, he was a stinker, just to be polite. Now, I can understand why his 4 sons all grieved, you know, as their father. And fathers do certain things to children and, you know, spend time and play with them and support them. And if I was his son, I'd probably be one of the corrupt bunch too, but I'm not his son. Thank you, Jesus. There are good things happen. Thank you, Jesus, for that. I'm not a Bush. I don't hate the Bushes, but I couldn't help but watch it at least one time where they're talking about Zapata Offshore Oil Company. And George Bush suddenly moved to Texas and he got into the offshore oil business. Why? They never discussed why. Well, the reason why is simple. With 3 offshore platforms, he had a place where he could base enemies of our republic, of the United States of America. He could coordinate assassinations. He could launch forays into Cuba against President JFK's explicit instructions and never be held accountable. Why didn't they ask, who are these other partners of Zapata Offshore Oil Company? Oh, they might have been CIA operatives. They may have been Arabic CIA operatives. They may have been connected to the royal family, Saud family of Saudi Arabia. And it may have brought up other issues they didn't want you to think about, because this was all about what a wonderful guy he was. He was such a nice guy. We're all going to cry tears. I didn't shed a single tear. And I kind of like want to, if I could look down through another dimension and look way down, might see him down there in hell burning along with Tom Sneddon and other criminals. He was a one-term president, they lamented. Yeah, for good reason. And we, the people, back in that day, the youngsters today that are under 40 won't remember, but we remember. He said, I'll promise you, no new taxes. So we elected him. Bam, he hit us with a new tax right away. He didn't waste any time. Bam, got to have a new tax. Of course, they excused that and said, well, a realistic politician, has to look at the realities of his job and the country, and yeah, we had to have new taxes. Well, he was a liar, and he was caught in his lie. And that put in another bad president who none of us really wanted, but the bank gangsters did. See, the bank gangsters play both parties. They play the Democrats up, and then when that gets too stinky and you can't take it anymore, they raise up a Republican or someone's under the Republican label, but they're not really Republicans. Republicans were supposed to be for peace and prosperity. Peace, prosperity. Not endless wars, but I couldn't stand it. And if you were watching my show, Take Back America, the last week, on the same television set, if you had switched to my channel, you would have seen me expounding the specifics of why we know George Herbert Walker Bush, the criminal and president, and CIA, head of the CIA, gee, what a surprise. CIA should all be arrested and made to prove they're innocent. They can't, because they're all collaborated in all kinds of murders. Even if you're just a secretary at Langley, you cooperated and helped get people murdered. That's what the CIA does. They really don't work for we the people. How many of you have ever been rescued by a CIA agent? How many have ever been drowning in a beach and the CIA agents rush into the water and pull you out? No, that's not their job. You're right. Their job is to assassinate, put out disinformation, put out mind control. And that's what we were just exposed to. Days after day on Fox. What a wonderful president. No, he wasn't a wonderful president. He was a horrible president. Just horrible. And it takes, a person of real intellect to see that, to go back and, oh yeah, he was there at JFK's assassination, along with LBJ, who was vice president. He was in the parade. He was, George W. Bush was there. George Herbert Walker Bush was there. George W. was just a kid. His dad was just saying, this is, come on, kid, we're going to show you, this is how we whack a president. And everybody who cooperated, who went to that meeting on the 21st of November in 1963, who was there? President Nixon, J. Edgar Hoover, second in command of the CIA, which was not George Herbert Walker Bush at the time. He was low-level CIA, but he was doing this operative, and his reward was he gets to be president someday. Even though it was only one term, they kept the word. He got to be president. Hope we never have another Bush in any Senate, governor's office, presidents again. Whatever you got to do, get rid of that. Don't even let them get the nomination. Bad people. Bushes are bad people. So, who was there? Nixon, LBJ, second command of the CIA was at that meeting. Of course, LBJ, and he's the one, his mistress came out and said, boasted, next week I'll be president. That was LBJ's mistress. And she recounted on TV. And it only ran like one time and then it disappeared. So what you just saw on the corporate TV, on almost every major channel, on and on and on and on and on and on, what a wonderful president, what a great father, what a great humanitarian. No, he wasn't. He didn't go down to the rebels in El Salvador and say, stop killing civilians. Really? Show me a videotape. How do you know he did that? What a crock. This man masterminded millions of people being killed, including the illegal chemical weapons used between Iraq and Iran that went to war against each other for a while, and killed 1 million of their own people with chemical weapons. How did they get those chemical weapons? Only the CIA could get those weapons to them without anybody in the public knowing. So, you've just been exposed to a massive dose of corporate propaganda on all major national television stations. Even CNN, which supposedly pushes the left, to me they're just pushing the left, which is controlled by the bank gangsters, versus Fox pushing the right, which is controlled by the bank gangsters, and their goal is to divide us so we learn to hate one another, fight with each other, and not seek a more perfect union under the control of we the people. Notice that expression in the preamble of the Constitution. It doesn't say we the great authorities appointed by God. It says we the people. It doesn't say we the authorities appointed by King George. It says we the people. You and I are the people. We got to exercise our brains and see through the propaganda. George Herbert Walker Bush was not reelected because he lied. I remember the lie. He said, no new taxes. And it got him the first 1 4-year term. But he lied. He slammed us with new taxes. And he did a lot of other bad things. Now, it's time to go back in time. I've got a little tape I want you to see. It's really interesting when you look back and see what was already said years ago. Here we go.
The Center situation.
World Trade 911?
Yes, sir. But here we are in America, the United States of America. I mean, how does something like that happen?
Well, if you look at the bombing of the center in 1993.
Yes, sir.
That was an FBI-run counterterrorism sting. Allegedly screwed up.
Right.
And supposedly they said, some people question, if you're doing a sting, why are you giving them real explosives?
Well, their plan used inert material. And one of the FBI supervisors came in at the last minute to make the prosecutions easier and whatnot. They decided to use live material, so it wouldn't be phony. And they let it get in and say no.
This is sick.
It's incredible.
Wow.
I'll give you a couple of articles on that.
Well, whenever you're ready.
Okay.
But you don't go out before you start. You don't want the sound of the door closed.
Yeah, okay.
Is that you do your volume test and all that already, Steve?
I see it, yeah. Well, I already got it set.
Okay, because of my extensive background in weapons and knowing what you can do, internal ballistics and what explosives will do, what they won't do, ranges of effectiveness of different kinds of warheads, different kinds of designs for different kinds of targets. When the bomb went off in Oklahoma, determined very quickly that something was not being reported accurately. What the FBI was saying could not possibly be right about what happened at the explosion and what was required to bring down that building, because I knew something about the architecture of the building. The building was uniform design. It had no load-bearing walls, and the truck bomb was out in the street. It wasn't sitting up against a pillar, and I just knew that it was technically impossible for that truck bomb to have brought it down, particularly 4,800 pounds of ammonium nitrate. You know, they started off with 1,200 pounds, they kept elevating, and finally wound up saying it was 1,200 pounds, 4,800 pounds. So in 2 days, I was in Senator Nichols' office trying to get them to keep the building from coming down so we could get elevating, and finally wound up saying it was 1,200 pounds, 4,800 pounds. So in 2 days, I was in Senator Nichols' office trying to get them to keep the building from coming down so we could get an independent investigator to go in there and determine what caused the building to collapse. 2 days later, Senator Nichols, the guy, told me, he said, well, there's a lot of difference of opinion with respect to what happened in Oklahoma. And so I knew then that they weren't going to do anything. So I sat down and put together a report and sent it to about 100 senators and congressmen. It was my analysis of what had transpired. And I sent that to 100 senators and congressmen. I got several letters back, but most sent my report to the FBI and sent me a letter that said, well, we forward your report to the FBI for their consideration. And so the FBI went with most all of those reports. Then I had the opportunity to go down to Oklahoma and a lot of people down there. I talked to the engineer who was responsible for shoring up the building, the engineer, the architect who had designed the building, and I met the elevator crew who were en route to the building, to the Murrah building, for their periodic maintenance check when the bomb went off. And so they were there in the building in just a few minutes and worked to get the elevators up and running so they could use them in the rescue effort. Well, throughout the cleaning process, they were taking pictures of what happened in the Murrah building all over, everywhere, the damage and all kinds of pictures. And so I met them and got copies of all those pictures, and I had photographic evidence then to corroborate my technical analysis. And I came back home and turned out another report, which is this report, Bomb Damage Analysis of the Alfred Murrah Building. And this report was after the building was brought down. The first report I sent to senators and congressmen, the building was still up. And they were very anxious. The governor was pushing, the mayor, they were all pushing to get the building down ASAP. Well, actually, the architect said the building ought to be built because it didn't have that much damage. 3/4 of it was still standing, and that's what he told me. But he said the governor wanted it down ASAP. Anyway, when this report went out, I sent independently addressed letter to every senator and every congressman. They were handled by myself and one other person to every office in the Senate and the House. And I sent about these to media all over the country, every newspaper, every outlet in the United States. I had all these places, and I sent about 1,000 of them out. So, and then I did probably 1,000, almost 2,000 hours of radio and TV talk shows on the subject of the Murrah building. But as you learn more and more about it, there was a monstrous cover-up in the what happened down there. And if you go back and look at what happened in the bombing of the Trade Center in 1993, there's no question but what it was a counterterrorism sting operation that was screwed up. I guess the most complimentary thing you could say about it is that it was what counterterrorism sting screwed up. Make down from there. The can I stop a second?
Sure.
Yeah, you can use that. I don't see how you can use that. Idiot.
I'll show it to you after, so
okay.
On this thing if you want to see it.
You know what you're doing, Adam.
But it probably attracted you.
Well, I couldn't figure out how you could use that road. I've never seen that done before, rotating.
Well, they'll do like, you'll see cuts. People's interviews will be from under a table leg. And, you know, the main shots here. I had to set up, I have another camera out there to do it with, but I said, well, I'll just stick with this for right now. To get too elaborate, I don't know what your time schedule is. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
I just talked about the bombing in the Trade Center.
Well, folks, that's a feed from Virginia. This is a live show. Obviously, the cameraman was having some problems. I don't know if he was smoking something or he was doing some kind of illegal drugs. But that was the real General Ben Parton, and he does have inside information on what was going on at the Oklahoma City bombing, where more than 100 people died, most of them children in daycare. And I can't get over the strange fact that there's 6 or 7 other federal employees that work in the ATF or BATF or the FBI and those other secret federal agencies. None of them brought their kids to the daycare center that day.
Were there other government employees that had children enrolled?
I think there was one, but they were in like a Social Security office, worked in like a Social Security office, not one of the clandestine cloak and dagger agencies of the federal government. That's a good question, though, Joyce. There's a book written about the parents of the people's kids that died there and the adults that died. But my investigation is still going on, and to me the biggest red herring in the Oklahoma City bombing, I know some of you weren't born when this happened. Joyce was. She was in kindergarten. Her mother was telling me she was changing her diapers when this happened, right?
Oh, I was not wearing diapers in kindergarten.
Oh, well, that was a joke.
I know how you raised your kids.
Slap them and beat them 3 times an hour to make sure that they learn right from wrong. Well, we're going to go back to General Parton. Yeah. And I'm telling you, people, you won't see this guy on your mainstream media because he knows too much that this Oklahoma City bombing was not done, could not have been done by Timothy McVeigh, who allegedly was sentenced to death and executed. Could not have been done.
And why is that?
Well,
why can he build a bomb?
Well, let's go back to, it's a good question. I think General Parton will answer that here in a minute.
Excellent.
Smile, Joyce. Be happy. We're going to Virginia. At least on camera.
I love a good video.
The experience and training that I had was just no comparison. But anyway, that was part of their discovery. And the people who were handling the case, Mr. Jones down in Oklahoma, they wanted me to appear at the trial in Denver, and so he had sent a team of people down here to talk about the interaction of the explosives and concrete. And when they got here, they said, well, that's not why we're here. We can we have subpoena power, and is there anything you would like us to get that would improve your confidence in your technical analysis. I said, there's nothing I need to improve my confidence in my technical analysis. There's some things that are possible and some things that are impossible in explosives. And at least I said I would like to have it, make it more convincing to some people if I had highly accurate photography of 4 terminal junctions between the transfer beams and floor. And they said they would get that, go back and subpoena and get that to them. I never heard from them again until they were submitting a paper for me to appear as a witness, technical expert. And when I finished talking to one of Mr. Jones, Attorney Jones' assistants, I asked him, I said, well, I got a lot of things on my schedule. When can I expect to be called if I'm going to be called? He said, well, whether you're called or not depends upon what the prosecution says and does. So I knew then that they were not going to call. I know that the lawyer who was handling the case for McVeigh before Jones took it over had arranged to have the building get an injunction, court injunction, to keep the building from coming down until there could be another analysis. And there was a bill to be paid to pay for that, getting that injunction. And the Jones, when he took over, they did not follow through, and they let the building come down without other. But the building was hauled off to a place, and it wasn't just piled up in it was big. They had a piece of equipment out there. I went out to the chain link fence, guards on the gate, and they had a piece of equipment out there that looked like surface coal mining equipment, where they were burying, I guess, 300 truckloads. So it was not that all this debris was hauled out there and buried, so nobody would have access to determine where you had what had really happened.
Who cleaned up the company?
Pardon me?
The company that cleaned it up. Who?
It's a company in Baltimore. Same one that had the I think.
His cousin?
I don't know, but I talk to those people. I have absolutely no confidence in it. But anyway, the thing was, I considered a cover-up from one end to the other. The people down there doing investigation, the Muslim community down there in the city was participating in it. They're all, and all the photographs, I think it was different surveillance cameras, would have shown everything. And the FBI has never released them. The judge said they would release them when the case was closed. If the case has been closed, they have never released them. Well, they can't release them because so many fibs have been told that there's no way. They'll never release them. Maybe 50 years from now, but they're not going to release them. So, if you look at the situation, McVeigh was and Nichols interacting with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in the and the guy who was the director of security for the embassy in the Philippines made the statement and published an article recently that Mr. Norton, ambassador down there, was chairing a group of CIA people and FBI people looking at and tracking the operations of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the people down there in the Philippines, and that's who Nichols was seeing, and that's where he got money and so forth. He testified, in that article he stated that they knew about, the ambassador knew about the plot and plans for 9/11 as well as the bombing of the Murrah building as early as 1994. So that's just another point that just tells you there's a lot more people involved in what happened in Oklahoma than anybody wants to admit. It wasn't just a Nichols thing. Now, you don't have to go very far to come to that conclusion. There's too many things. Too many other people's witnesses saw other people. And the FBI wouldn't do a 302 on things that were inconsistent with their analysis. And I just say I think it's last November the 1st, a young guy at the University of Oklahoma blew himself up. He had a backpack on and a body wrap exposed, laced with shrapnel, And when it started to go into there was a football game going on. And he went over there and he started to go in, and she saw that they were patting people down and checking everything that people had going in. So he came back away from the gate and sat down on the park bench and took his jacket off. And then he started fiddling with his vest wrap, and the thing blew up on him and left nothing there but a bottom part of his torso. Well, they brought an EOD truck. He lived in the dormitory with the Muslim guy who I was told his father owned several of the big mosques around in the country, used for the Underground Railroad. And they went out there, they brought an EOD truck up, and then they brought 2 semis up. And they unloaded over 1,000 pounds of high explosives out of that dormitory. And the FBI and the CIA, I was told, went down there and shut it down, and almost nothing was said about it. I know the Washington Post and the Times had about a 1-inch column back in the middle of the report somewhere. About 1,000 pounds of high explosives in a dormitory. They said at least. How much more than that, I don't know. But that was what was reported from people down there who were doing the investigation. So, there's no question that Oklahoma, the bombing of the Murrah building, there were a lot more people involved in McVeigh as they tried to make it out. A lot more people involved. I have not delved into this as much as the people down in Oklahoma, but there's been a lot of investigation and a lot of people reporting, trying to get the information to the FBI. I pulled a lot of this information together, and one witness, I had a letter from a witness down there. She tried to get the FBI to take this deposition down there, and they would not take her information. And I hand-delivered it to Senator Ashcroft, not Senator Ashcroft, but Ashcroft was the head of the Department of Justice, and I have 3 mutual friends with Ashcroft, and I went to his house with him and gave him a 4-page executive summary of a bunch of stuff, plus 13 attachments, and I never saw anything really come of it. Later, I did an analysis on the shoot-down of TW-800. I looked into that quite extensively, and what was said just did not make sense at all. And this really stemmed from my work on the Beaumont warhead, continuous rod warhead. Because what was being reported and how the aircraft was brought down, you don't bring down a 747 with a little handheld missile with one shot. 007, the aircraft that had, came down over Sockland, you remember? 007, KL-007, that he was hit by 2 air-to-air missiles. And from the decompression time, they estimated it was about 18 square inches of hole made, which isn't very much. And you have to be had a very particular place with an infrared missile to bring down something like 747. And because of that, if you have a bomber going after an aircraft, after, say, a city with a nuclear weapon or an aircraft carrier, you don't want to hit a blast frag warhead because, well, if you're using an infrared missile going after a hot engine or something, you've got a CEP of around 3 feet. If you're guiding on a reflector radar or semi-active active radar going after a beacon or transponder or something like that, much more.
Mr. Hill, I want that cameraman in Virginia fired. I got a kink in my neck from him doing the Dutch angles. I want that. Can we cut his paycheck off immediately and retroactively make him pay us back? I'm serious. The cameraman there was smoking something. If he thought he was supposed to be artsy with the retired Air Force general who's the leading bomb expert at the time he retired from the United States military, something screw loose or he's on. Yeah, I wasn't happy with the tilted angles on that Unfortunately, that general's no longer available for interviewing. God has called him to another place, a better place, I hope. But I hope you got the message. That guy knows what he's talking about. And all this government rot that you've been sold on, you know, is just garbage. Just garbage. One of the things, Earl Warren, who was a big shot in California and then went on to be Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, SCOTUS, the big shot in the legal system, Earl Warren, told a good, trusted friend of his before he passed away, he was so sorry he ever let Lyndon Baines Johnson put his name on the Warren Report, because it was full of lies, distortions, and they specifically left out real important information that should have been in there. Earl Warren. Too bad he didn't make that realization while he was still on the Supreme Court. But even he was only this tall, and LBJ was that tall, and LBJ had this way of looking down and going, "You're going to do what I want." And he intimidated the Chief Justice of SCOTUS. How can you get away with intimidating a guy who can't be removed from office? How do you do that? Well, it's done if you know you're working with the CIA and they're backed up by the bank gangsters and they get anybody assassinated anywhere in the world. That's how it's done. So, Herbert Walker Bush, George IV of the United States. You know, there's King George I, King George II, King George III, which we kicked out of this country, and now we had a King George IV. The guy who said, "Watch my lips, no new taxes." Bam, and then he hit us with new taxes as soon as he won the election. That should have been a clue. This guy was a really bad president, and we the people got it, and we voted him out. Unfortunately, the alternative we elected was not somebody like the libertarian Ed Brown. Instead, we put in another criminal of the Democrat variety, Democratic Party variety, I should say. Are we ready? Let's roll that. Here's a little clip. We're going to go back because we're getting to that time in which that horrible monster, that's Mad Dog Sneddon, better named Snake Sneddon, put Michael Jackson on trial, knowing he was innocent. Let's go to that.
And deteriorating. We are on the verge of a wider war in the Middle East, an attack on Iran over the immediate weeks and even days ahead, and then the question of the Third World War itself, the collision with Russia and or China, and I'll get to that in just a minute. The nightmare vision of the Cold War that you may have thought you left behind in the early 1990s or the late 1980s is back the day after, the mushroom cloud and everything that goes with it. And I recommend that you now transform your political thinking according to this reality. The neocon fascist madmen have brought it back. It's not relegated to the past of the Cold War. It is with us, most emphatically, right now. Compared to this, I have to say, most other issues pale into insignificance. This is where you must be active. Now, obviously, the big threat is the immediate attack on Iran. And this is expected now practically from day to day. Let's go through. The neocon theme song, according to UPI, right? Woolsey, the former head of the CIA, was asked, what's his Iran policy? And he says, it's bomb, 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 Iran, bomb, 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 Iran. So again, the neocon fascist madmen, the one-trick ponies, always the same note. War, war, war. Any conceivable human problem, their answer is war. The London Economist wants to know if the stealth bombers will soon be attacking Iran. This is from the last couple of weeks. Everything is in place. The surge is a mask for a troop buildup vis-a-vis Iran. The 4 or 5 carrier battle groups are there. The air bases in Romania, Bulgaria, Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. The Israelis are practicing their own bombing runs, flying up and down the Mediterranean from Israel to Gibraltar and back, approximately the equivalent of the Iranian run. U.S. drones are constantly flying over Iran. They're often getting shot down. And of course, the U.S. and the British are committing acts of war against Iran, and have been for now for years practically, with special forces on the ground in Iran. And of course, we now have the demonization of people like Ayatollah Khamenei. You can think whatever you want of these people. They have never attacked anybody. Forget what they say. Their rhetoric, of course, is deplorable. But they've never attacked anybody. That's the bedrock reality. And of course, they're not alone. We have Syria, Assad, and the president of Iran, so there's more to it than just Iran. It would be a regional war, tremendous consequences. The goal of all this is the Bernard-Lewis plan. And in particular, this you can see, it calls for the carving up, the dismemberment, the balkanization of every state in the Middle East, but in particular, Iran. Notice that part of Iran will be carved away, according to the U.S.-British plan, for the Kurds, for the Azerbaijanis, for the Turkmen, for the Baluchis, and the really interesting one is this one, Arabistan, Ahvaz, or Khuzestan as it's called. This happens to be the oil area. It's got all the oil fields and the Cargill Island tanker terminal, and the U.S. and the British are sending in terrorists right now to commit terrorism in this area with a view to detach it from Iran and make it into an Anglo-American colony. I call this the BP Liberation Front, because British Petroleum, this is, of course, the Anglo-Iranian oil company. This is the mastermind of the entire thing. This is the person who's running U.S. and British Middle East policy. It is Bernard Lewis, agent of the British Arab Bureau. Note well, a certified British agent runs the entire policy. That was the Bernard Lewis plan you have seen. The Israelis have their own version of it, but it all comes from him. And now we have eager imitators of Bernard Lewis. Here's a guy from Pakistan who wants to tell you how to carve Pakistan into 4 or 6 parts. In other words, the program of the U.S. and the British and the Israelis is the destruction of entire nations. That is their goal. Now, naturally, you cannot do this without eliciting tremendous resistance, rivers of blood, kinds of retaliation that we don't want to find out about. And then, of course, we go from the Middle East regional war involving Iran, Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and other states. You can just imagine, I could give you detailed scenarios how they all get involved, to a world war. This is the oil aorta of the world, right? Here's the Persian Gulf, or the Arabian Gulf if you're an Arab. Here's the Straits of Hormuz. This stuff out here is the Gulf of Oman. Still further is the Arabian Sea. About a third of the world's oil comes through here. And it's about as narrow as the island of Manhattan. And a couple of hulks sunk here will block it. Plus you can release mines. You can use any kind of tanks, artillery you have, torpedoes, suicide boats, whatever you want, to sink all kinds of tankers and other vessels in this area. And in case of a war with Iran, it is very likely that the Iranians will simply interdict the Straits of Hormuz, cutting off 1/3 of the world's oil. And for you who are so dependent on automobiles, that means $200, $300 a barrel oil, $500 a barrel oil, $25 a gallon for your gasoline, $50 a gallon for your gasoline. The end is the opposite. But from a military point of view, we are now on the verge of the absolute critical period. And again, the question is, what are you going to do about it? And I'll try to show you what I recommend. Now, the other aspect of it is, if you get the mass bombing of Iran, we have a very clear perspective for the encirclement and destruction of the U.S. forces in Iraq. Now, everybody knows this stuff by now. We have the Kurds, we have the Shiites, and we have the Sunnis, Baathists, and so forth. The Kurds are pro-U.S., more or less, for their own reasons. The Shiites are neutral, and the Sunnis are doing the fighting. You have your famous Sunni triangle. This is where most of the fighting goes on, around Baghdad and these other places, Tikrit, Hamadi, Fallujah, and the rest of them. problem. All the supplies for the U.S. forces, the 150, 170,000 that are up here, have to come through that Persian Gulf that we just saw, which will be interdicted like mad. They're unloaded in Kuwait, and they go up this supply line. It's 2 roads, each 400 miles long, 800 miles of roads to defend. Now, all you have to do is put the Mahdi army with some bazookas and rocket-propelled grenades and what have you, these green arrows, along this road, and you can begin to destroy the tanker trucks, because everything is brought in by truck. The food, the water, the medical supplies, the ammunition, and everything else. What kind of gasoline does a tank consume? It gets about 1 mile per gallon if you're lucky. So the logistical needs are enormous. This is a logistical nightmare. Now, this area had been guarded by multinational forces. There used to be Poles, they're gone. Ukrainians, gone. Italians, gone. Spanish, gone, so forth. And it adds up to a lot. The British are now left here with 7,200. The British are now leaving. The British have announced the first third of their forces will leave. Isn't that interesting? Perfide Albion strikes again. The British, as usual, get out when the need is greatest. They're followed by the Danes immediately, and others are going to leave too. Only Georgia is willing to send more at the present time. Now, the Mahdi army is bad enough, but if you attack Iran, then you're going to have the Iranian thrusts across here. In other words, this jugular vein, if you will be cut. And these forces up here will be pocketed. They'll be encircled. They will be caught in a kind of Stalingrad situation where they can simply be wiped out. In other words, the problem in Iraq is not simply civil war that's happening to somebody else, but the ascent and destruction of your own military forces. Now, it's worth avoiding this, because this debacle, this kind of a catastrophe, would probably be a catalyst for fascism on the home front. In other words, this kind of a catastrophic military reverse could be used by these desperate demagogues to impose a full dictatorship in this country. Now, this is too long to go through, but I did a detailed comparison, of course, between Bush in 2007 and Hitler in 42, 43, and it's actually uncanny. They're bogged down in their aggression. Bush is obsessed with Baghdad. Hitler was obsessed with Stalingrad. He fires his main generals, Abizaid Casey, Halder, List, von Kleist, von Bock, and so forth, von Brauchitsch. It means the supply lines are in the hands of private contractors and South Asian drivers, guys from Bangladesh, Pakistan, the Philippines, and so forth. Hitler had Romanians, Hungarians, and Italians on the flanks, people who were not motivated to fight for this dream. And of course, the main thing is the retreat into a dream world and the refusal to face military defeat and retreat. Save your forces. Don't have them wiped out and annihilated. So Bush and Hitler both retreating into a dream world of fantasy, intuition, and lunacy. And of course, the Anglo-American model of war has not fared well. I find when I give these speeches, most people still do not know that the Israelis were massively defeated in Lebanon last summer. They were mauled. They were mauled by the Lebanese Hezbollah. This is what happens when the Anglo-Americans, with their model of warfare, their aircraft and their tanks, go up against determined guerrilla forces. That's an invincible, impregnable, invulnerable Merkava tank of the latest type, when you see what happened to it. It fared rather poorly. This is the image of what's happening to the British and the NATO forces in Afghanistan, the U.S. in Iraq, and very soon in Iran, and what has happened to the Israelis in Lebanon. So this is a very bad bet. If you start a world war under these conditions, you're sure to lose it. That's the big argument against world war that anybody can understand. Don't start it because you'll lose it. And Afghanistan is even worse. This is even more landlocked. The logistical nightmare here between Peshawar and Kabul, the so-called the myth-drenched Khyber Pass, of course. This can also be interdicted, and we're just waiting now for the Taliban's spring offensive to start. So this is a disaster also. Look how far inland that is, and it's all the way on the other side of the world. It's a tremendous logistical nightmare. So again, the attack on Iran is the end of the world as we've known it. We have to deal, first of all, with the fact that the United States is today controlled by a clique which traces its image directly back to Hitler. Carl Schmitt, Hitler's lawyer, had a protege, Leo Strauss. Leo Strauss is the guru for the neocons. There it is in a nutshell. They are the heirs of Hitler. We had a problem at the Phoenix conference. We had Holocaust deniers coming forward. This is absolute lunacy. Bush is in the Hitler tradition, not us. They're responsible for the Holocaust. His faction did it. We had no part in this. Cheney Doctrine. We're under the Cheney Doctrine. It's been in place since 2004, known since 2005. The Cheney Doctrine calls for a new 9/11 with weapons of mass destruction as a pretext for a nuclear attack on Iran. And this is part of the global strike program of the Pentagon. In other words, it's what Seymour Hersh wrote about a couple of days ago in the New Yorker, that Bush gives an order to nuke Iran one morning, and 24 hours later, the bombs and missiles fall on Iran. So to hit any point in the world within 24 hours, they think they have this, but of course only with nuclear weapons. Not a land invasion. They can't afford that anymore. So it's going to be breaching the nuclear taboo at this point. Now, we have this very important and authoritative warning. People know Zbigniew Brzezinski. He's not a philanthropist. He is the person who started the Afghan war. And he boasts that he created the Afghan war of 1979 to 1989. He says, I brought down the Soviet Union with my Afghan war. So he knows how these things are done. However, he is a realist. He has contempt for the neocons. He says the neocons are obsessed with Israel. He's, of course, a petty Polish aristocrat. And he says, look, forget mucking around in the Middle East. March on Moscow and you control the world. So that's his program. He has a factional difference with the neocons. He says, forget about Iran. It's worthless. Get to the point. Get to Moscow and Beijing, and then it's all over. So he gives this testimony to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, February 1st. There he is. Quite a tough customer in his own way. And again, not a humanitarian, but arguing from his own imperialist point of view what he says now. If the U.S. continues to be bogged down in a protracted, bloody involvement in Iraq, the final destination on this downhill track is likely to be a head-on conflict with Iran and with much of the world of Islam at large. That is already a world war. A plausible scenario for a military collision with Iran involves Iraq failure to meet the benchmarks, like these mythical guidepost goals or whatever Bush talks about, followed by accusations of Iranian responsibility for the failure. Now, this is where we are already, right? That Iran furnishes weapons, right? These anti-tank devices, IEDs, that this is somehow inadmissible. Right? Neocon mentality is it's okay, you can wage war, but nobody else can wage war. They imagine war as a one-way street, and if somebody else responds, they become indignant. I don't know. It's funny. Or, and this is the key, by some provocation in Iraq, or a terrorist act in the U.S. blamed on Iran. Think of it. This is basically everything we have tried to educate the U.S. population about. The point of studying 9/11 is, of course, because of the inherent historical interest and the entire complex of questions of justice and responsibility involved with it. But it's also, most emphatically, to stop a second one with weapons of mass destruction. Right? To educate the U.S. population so they're no longer manipulable by terrorist provocations. And here's Brzezinski saying the scenario is on, there's going to be a provocation in Iraq or a terrorist act in the U.S. blamed on Iran. Now, if you get one thing out of this, if weapons of mass destruction go off anywhere in the world, don't think Iran, don't think Hezbollah, don't think Bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, the cave, the laptop, and the rest of this idiotic fairy tale. Think one thing, Cheney, Cheney's office, Cheney's backers, Cheney's controllers, the Cheney-acts are the ones who will bring you that event. And here's where it goes. We get a defensive U.S. action against Iran. We get a lonely America in a spreading and deepening quagmire that will include Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. This is already about half the world. This you don't want. This is worth fighting to avoid. It's worth being active over the next 2 or 3 weeks so that whatever happens, you can stick yourself in the mirror. And there is the point. A plausible military scenario for a military collision with Iran involves a terrorist act in the U.S. blamed on Iran. So he knows it's being prepared. Now, if I were in Congress, I'd say emergency hearings, Brzezinski subpoenaed. Who told you that? How do you know that? Where's it being prepared? What are your sources? Tell us everything. Tell. He mentions anybody, they're subpoenaed, brought in. What is it? We want it all done in one day. We have flying squads of marshals delivering subpoenas. We want to know about it. We're going to trace it all the way up. We're going to shut it down. Because the Democratic Party, feckless, gutless, clueless, useless.
Yeah, that was Webster Tarpley, a man from that I filmed. He's from Maryland. He's in the beltway of Washington, D.C., what I like to call the Washington District of Criminals. I don't know how Trump can drain the swamp. I mean, I don't think the ocean could hold all the corruption that is enveloped from K Street all over the District of Criminals area there. But good luck, Donald Trump. I'm so glad you pardoned the Hammonds up in Oregon. Now, I promised you something about Michael Jackson, and we slipped in Tarpley because he was right. You know, at the time I was filming that, I was like, I'm not sure I agree with him on everything. But as to Cheney and Bush, he was spot on. He was just ahead of his time. Like some people say, I am ahead of my time. You know, 18 some years ago, I did a show with people and they were pushing for legalization of marijuana. People, oh, Wagener, you're crazy. It'll never legalize marijuana. Well, California now has legalized marijuana for all adults and even some teenagers that have medical issues with certain types of cancer. It's come to pass. What I want to show you now is a guy named Raffles Van Exel. He was a guest only once on my show, and he then became a person of interest later. Here we are, way back in the Michael Jackson trial period, while the trial's going on in 2005. Raffles.
I agree. You see, I mean, the thing is, and that's what I said from day one, people cannot judge Michael Jackson unless you have lived his lifestyle or you've been a part of his lifestyle. A lot of people, even for example today, Chris Tucker looking over the phone bill. Everybody was talking when he admitted that he has never seen a phone bill. He doesn't even know how to read it. People of that stature don't see phone bills. They don't see bills. He does not know what an incoming call is and an outgoing call is, the time and how you read it, because he's never seen it. But for people like you and me, we're like, is he for real? But you cannot judge any celebrity unless you have lived the lifestyle or you've been a part of it.
Raffles Van Exel, thanks for joining us today. You're an entrepreneur, and you threw a birthday party for Michael Jackson once or twice, didn't you?
I've been involved with the birthday parties for Michael's 45th birthday downtown LA, where we brought numerous of celebrities to the birthday party and the $5,000 party at Neverland.
What hotel? Is that the Bonaventure Hotel? You had that one in downtown LA?
No, that was at the Hyatt, at the Hyatt Hotel downtown. And
that's Raffles Van Exel, who I think the Dutch police find him to be a person of interest a couple of years back here, but not back when I was doing that interview. But it was interesting because he stood up to defend Michael. He was here at the trial for a few days, and he drove up in a car that was so brand new it wasn't even in the showrooms of most dealers. That's what I remember keenly. And we talked a little more with him on the show, and I think it's worth looking back. We're going back now, at 13 years or so, when I was doing 10 shows during the Michael Jackson trial. I never thought the trial would go on more than 4 weeks. It was so obvious Michael was innocent. I mean, it was blatantly obvious in your face. You had to be a dedicated Satanist like Mad Dog Snedden, that I like to call Snake Snedden, because he slithered in and slithered out, and he knew Michael was innocent, and he prosecuted him anyway. Later on, I'll tell you why I know. Snedden knew Michael was innocent of these charges that he prosecuted him on. But I want to go to Raffles again, back in 2005.
Yeah, but so may sign a book deal under an alias and the money goes offshore. I think they should prohibit, period. No book deal, no TV rights or whatsoever. That's the only way you can
punish him?
Probably get justice done. It's the same. I don't want to go back in time, but it's the same with the case, the first supposed child molestation charge. What was settled on the table, under the table.
Right.
Where Snedden probably created the grouch against Michael Jackson because he could not get his hands on that case 10, 11, 12 years ago. Now, my ordeal was, I'm not a parent, but I can state one thing. If you would have molested my child, no money on earth would have been good enough for me to settle. Because the point that I made to my child, sorry that you got molested, but I became a high-paid pimp.
Oh, you're talking about the Chandler case.
Exactly. I mean, I
didn't Mr. Chandler's first name either, but they had June Chandler on the witness stand, and I posed that question. If they think June Chandler points a finger at Michael for doing something wrong to the Chandler kid, or the Robson kid, or the Barnes kid, or the Conklin kid, all three of those last ones showed up and said nothing happened. Nothing happened. Why can't you believe it? And then the prosecutor says, well, what if he reached into your pants while you were sleeping?
Come on, isn't that the same way they told Macaulay Culkin?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. I might be a deep sleeper, but touch me on the wrong place, I will be awake.
I know when my wife touches me, I awake.
I mean, you know, but that's what I said. I mean, the point that they were trying to make, the father made to his kid 10, 11 years ago is unfortunate. Honey, sorry that it happened to you, but we made money out of it.
We made money. But you know what? That kid doesn't talk to his father or his mother anymore.
Yeah, but it also hurt Michael Jackson, quote-unquote, the king of pop's career right away, too. Because of that molestation charge, this one is now happening, and people are like, well, if it happened 12 years ago, something must have happened.
Right.
And
yeah, something happened, all right. Those Arvizo boys were really slime balls. And their mother had a backdoor dealing going on where they were trying to pressure Michael to give her a $1 million house somewhere near Neverland, somewhere out in Solvang. And she was such a slime ball. She got caught on tape, you know, stealing from, I think it was J.C. Penney's, some store, and she lied about it really badly. That came up. There was so much about the Arvizo family that was so negative. There is no way the jury could accept this family of criminals as giving true and good and honest evidence. And the biggest part to me was when they put that girly magazine, I think it was called Barely Legal, up on the screen, and Tom Metzero took his little pointer pen. He pulled out one of, you know, these little laser pointer pens, and he points, he says, all right, Gavin, can you read the date on the magazines you claim Michael gave you in bed to get you aroused? And he looks, Gavin looks at the date on the magazine, and he looks back, and Metzero says a little louder, the jury could point and look at the jury and tell him the date, because the date was the date way after the boys had testified they'd never been back to Neverland. So how could Michael have given the magazine that wasn't even published at the time the boys were at Neverland? To me, that was like, wow, this sinks it. And still, ABC and CBS and NBC and all the corporate media kept saying, oh, it looks bad for Michael. We had conflicting testimony today. It was not conflicting. They had the boy himself read, and Gavin wouldn't say the words because he knew he was caught in his lie. So what did he do? He just looked straight at Snake Snedden, Mad Dog Snedden to his friends, looked at him and goes, but he wouldn't actually get the words out of his mouth. so the court reporter could pick it up. I think the third time he mumbled. He mumbled out the date. That's how bad that trial was. And, you know, they ought to take that plaque off the district attorney's office in Santa Barbara. Shame on the county of Santa Barbara for, you know, praising this criminal who was our elected district attorney. And why isn't our current district attorney, Joyce Dudley, going after the white-collar criminals that have bamboozled Randy and Evie Quaid out of their Santa Barbara County home in Montecito up on East Mountain Road? There's a whole bunch of strange things, and our DAs simply ignore the real criminals and go after innocent people. On another show, we'll get into why Snedden did what he did, but not today. We're going to go back to what Raffles was saying here in this show we did during the Michael Jackson trial. Judgment. But Michael is tried as best as a 40-something man can do to maintain that child. And really, he's innocent. So there's your answer I couldn't give you back in '93. Raffles, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I mean, I don't think if Michael has been trying to portray a young man as kid, us being 47 years old, I think that we, the people, never considered Michael as a grown man until the child molestation charges happened. Because every time we think about Michael Jackson, we think about that cute little kid with the Jackson 5 singing there and entertaining us, who became the king of pop. And Michael Jackson was ageless. For the longest, Michael Jackson had no age on it until the second child molestation charge hit, that everybody was, wait a minute, the man is 47 years old.
Yeah.
And I think that is when, I think that's when we all grew up stating like, Michael is 45, 46, 47 years old. You know, but in his heart, what is the purest on earth?
I think
Cats and little babies, or little kids.
I think, you know, he does genuinely love little kids, and Ron Zonin brought up the issue to that expert from Arizona. Would someone who genuinely loves, I mean, I got to give Ron Zonin a little bit of credit. He was the only one of the prosecutors that had anything really functioning between the ears. And he did bring up the question. There was one question. He said, would someone have these kind of books and magazines if he truly loved little children? Very good question, Mr. Zonin. And my answer is this. If you go to the Vatican, supposedly one of the most holy places for all Christendom, and look up, you will see these very naked male bodies. And the Pope doesn't have a problem with that, Mr. Zonin. What I have a problem with they're tearing down the place in Santa Barbara where under Roman Catholic leadership boys were molested for decades, and Tom Snedden ignored it till the threshold got so high he couldn't ignore it, and then he let one of the culprits escape. Is that not a fact?
Yeah, oh no, I agree with you full-heartedly. I mean, especially by me growing up in Europe, isn't the human body the most beautiful thing on earth?
God thought so. That's why he didn't give us clothes when he made us.
I think so too.
But then you get fat and old like me, and we need a little clothes to hide all that stored energy we put on. Anyway, moving along. Gosh, how do we get there to say these things? I want to show you what it might be like when things get jubilant. If we're ready, I want to show you a few minutes of what it was like January 16th of 2004 as the fans stormed Neverland Gate. And we'll show you that footage now because William Wagener on Second Thought cameras were there back in January. Be back in a few minutes.
This is Eddie Griffin Scott.
Grab your pass. Yeah, okay. Hold on. Excuse me.
This is Eddie Griffin.
Where can we get one? Well, you were supposed to have one already from Santa Maria.
That's where I live. I was following everyone. I've been here so many times.
They were given out, so I don't know the exact person that gave them out, but without those passes, now they're still identities. Everyone else back. My mistake. Vehicles over. Vehicles over.
That's the way it looked way back in 2005 at Neverland Gates. It's a lot quieter these days in December of 2018 as we're doing this show on the 7th of December, where today there was a special ceremony at lunchtime for the veterans at the Maldonado Center, which I did not attend. I didn't want another free lunch. Well, looking back at what Raffles had to say back in '05 and I had to say, you would notice there was a book. It was Geraldine Hughes's book. I highly recommend you read that book. Snake Sneddon, known as Mad Dog to his friends, didn't read that book. Had the DA at the time, otherwise known as Thomas W. Sneddon, the Snake, had he read Geraldine Hughes's book, because she worked for the attorney that falsified the first allegations against Michael. And Sneddon believed those allegations were true, but had he read the book by Geraldine Hughes, who was the secretary for that rotten member of the rotten mafia known as the Bar Association, had Snake Sneddon read that, he would have known Michael was innocent back then too. Urge you to read Geraldine Hughes' book, because she worked for the crooked, bar-carded criminal. With that, I want to liven things up as we end the show today, and I put on my safari hat so any big bad birds don't swoop down and peck me on the head. But guinea pigs, you've heard of G-Force, right? The film about guinea pigs that formed G-Force. G is for guinea pig. Well, they had a confrontation one day, and Big Bad Bird and the guinea pigs, they didn't see things eye to eye. So I filmed it, and I'm going to let you have a sneak peek on this, even though Edie Quaid says she wants to produce and produce my guinea pig made-for-TV movie, but we'll see if that ever happens. Here it is. Fresh, no one's seen it before. Here you go. Thanks for watching. Look how Big Bad Bird's coming. Yes. 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 This is Miss Raccoon. She's a healthy girl.